All right, so since we're already a little late into this, I want to jump right into it. Hold on one second.
Robert, can I share a win?
Yeah, go ahead.
I went to an interview with a lady that had stated she was going to be interviewing other agents. And when I got there, we went through the whole spiel, did my presentation, and she still wouldn't sign the contract. So I asked her, since two months are better than one, 3 months are better than one, let's think aloud together. What are you thinking about? She says, I don't really know you and you haven't really sold any properties here. I go, what if I give you 3 references? Would you consider me for the job? She said, absolutely. Popped out 3 references and guess what?
What?
She gave me the listing without even interviewing the other agents.
There you go.
That was pretty cool. That was the first time I had to compete. And this is a beautiful community. I mean, beautiful home. My first largest sale in the history.
Good job. Way to go.
Thank you.
That's great.
Good job. Good job.
Love those wins.
Good job, Veronica.
Bravo,
Okay, so let me jump into this. So last week we were at the Century 21 Leadership Summit with a bunch of top leaders, obviously the president, CEOs, but other major broker owners within the organization were all out there. And so there was a few things that I wanted to share with you. So the first thing, I want to just jump right into the major thing. We had somebody there from Washington, D.C. talking about government affairs in relation to real estate. So is everybody aware that there has been a lawsuit going on with the National Association of Realtors and Department of Justice regarding buyer agent commissions?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Some do, some not. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but essentially, there's been a lawsuit going on in terms of how buyer agent commissions are being advertised, how buyer agents are being paid, and is it in the best interest of the consumer and how these things are being marketed, stuff like that. So the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors. This has been going on now for a few years. Well, the latest news, and this is just kind of just so you all know what's going on. As of the other day, the National Association of Realtors decided that they were not going to come to a settlement agreement and that they were going to go to trial. Okay, that's what the National Association of Realtors. When that news came out, Anywhere, who owns Century 21 amongst a number of other companies, decided we don't want to do that. We're settling. So as of the other day, Anywhere settled for $80 million to cover all of their brands, to say that we're done. We don't want to go to trial. We don't want to do this anymore. We're done. Now, the reason behind that is they didn't want this cloud hanging over the company anymore. That number one. Number two, they got tired of paying legal fees and this whole thing drawing out, with the anticipation that the Department of Justice is going to win and that the real estate companies are going to have to pay some money at some point. So they just decided they're out. RE/MAX did the same thing. RE/MAX said, we're out. Companies like Keller Williams and Compass and Berkshire decided, no, we're going to go to trial with NAR. Okay, all good. That doesn't really affect you in terms of the settlement, but there are a couple things that are really important for you to note in terms of how it impacts real estate agents with the settlement. There's a couple new policies that have been put into place as regards to the settlement. Some of these are things that were kind of always, best practices, but now they're the deal. So a couple things for you to write down. Number one is when you are representing a buyer, you can no longer say that your services are free. Cannot use the word free. Now, sometimes people would say, well, Mr. Misspire, the seller pays me, so I'm actually working for you for free. Or my services to you are free because the seller pays me. You can no longer say your services are free. Okay. So it used to be kind of the best practice. Now it's a thing. You can't say your services are free. Okay. So that's now I'm going to get into a little bit. One of the other things that was a takeaway from this was buyer agent commissions, but we'll get to that in a second. The second thing is I don't think this is really a big issue, but it got brought up. So it must be a big issue somewhere across the country. When you are taking a listing, you have to input the buyer's agent's commission immediately. So I guess what one of the issues was that people would take listings and then they wouldn't put the buyer's agent's commission in, and then they would therefore they would kind of be negotiating that. If you're charging a buyer's agent, or if you're giving a buyer's agent's commission, you got to put it in right away, even if it's $1. Okay, because we understand in our MLS you are allowed to put $1. Whatever it is, you have to put it in. So if it's 2%, if it's 2.5%, if it's 1.5, whatever it is, you have to put it in immediately when you take a listing. Again, I don't think that's really a big issue for us, but just telling you what were some of the headlines.
Robert, does that mean the contract or the MLS?
In the MLS,
Okay, MLS, gotcha.
when you're inputting a listing in the MLS, you have to put the buyer's agent's commission in as soon as you put in the listing. Next thing, which our MLS already did, so it doesn't impact you, but I'll just let you know, is you can't search listings by buyer's agent's commission. So I don't know if you've all noticed, when you go to the MLS, if you search for properties, you can't filter by buyer's agent's commission. Okay, so our MLS already took that away, but nationally, none of the brands are allowed to do that as well. Okay. Now, this one here is what I'm about to say next is kind of complicated, so hear me out on this, but this is a biggie. Okay, this is a biggie. They've identified the difference between a customer and a client. Okay. A client is someone who has signed a contract to work with you, whether it be a seller or a buyer. Okay, there's a written agreement that says I'm working with you. A customer is someone who doesn't have a written agreement with you, and it's just, you're just giving information to. Okay. So this is in regards to double ending deals. This is important. If you have a listing and somebody comes to you, a potential buyer comes to you and says, I'm just going directly to the listing agent. I would like you to represent me on the purchase of this transaction. Okay, great. You are not allowed to give any advice on the type of offer they should write unless they sign a contract to work with you. Okay, so here's what I mean. Let me give you an example. You have a listing. Potential buyer comes to you and says, hey, I want to write up an offer with you. And you say, great. And they say, well, what do you think I should write up the offer at? You are not allowed to give that advice unless they sign an agency agreement or a buyer broker agreement to work with you. So if they come to you and say, well, how much do you think I should write up an offer? If they don't want to sign a contract, say, then I can't give you any advice. I can write the offer, but you have to come up with your own terms and price, and I can write the offer. So if they come to you and say, hey, I want you to represent me, I want to offer $1 million for this property, you could say, okay, you don't need to get a contract signed because it was their price. You didn't lead them in any way. But if they come to you and they say, what price do I suggest? And you say, well, why don't we start at $950? I'll bring it to the seller and see what happens. You are in violation unless you have a buyer broker agreement signed or an agency agreement signed. Okay. The reason they're doing that is because they feel that if you're representing the seller and a client comes to you and wants terms or ideas on terms or pricing and what to offer, and you don't have a contract signed, then you're not giving your full fiduciary duties to the seller. Okay, you're essentially helping a customer who is not in a contract to work with you work against your seller. That's the mentality. So, but if you have an agreement signed with the buyer, then you can give them your advice. That makes sense, everybody,
Yes,
what I
correct.
just said.
What is
That
this
that
brand
that
new?
How long does that? Sorry.
This is
go ahead,
brand
Gabby.
new, Robert.
Yes,
What
yeah.
did they do?
This is new. So this is going to go into effect here soon, but it's been best practice to just start doing that now.
Thank you.
Robert, a quick question.
Hold on one second, Sandy. Hold on one second, Sandy. Jack, go ahead.
Those were just things, clients, customer, those were when we took the license, those were just standard practice, right? But it's just nobody really enforced it.
Correct.
How is there a length of that contract?
No, you set the length. You set the length of the contract, so it could be just for this one property. It could be I'm going to represent you to help you buy a property for a month, 3 months, 6 months. You set the terms of the contract. But if it has to do with any property that you're listing, you definitely have to keep it for the length of however the property's listed.
Okay, that makes sense. I
Robert,
think those are good practices, I think good changes.
but that is only for double ending, right? Not
That's only
when
for
you-
double ending, correct. So it's only if you're representing the seller and a buyer wants to come to you and have you represent them. You can't give them any advice unless you have a buyer's representation agreement signed. Okay. Now, again, if the buyer comes, let's say the listing's $1 million and the buyer comes to you and says, I want you to represent me. I want to write the offer for $1 million. It was their price. It was their suggestion. You don't have to get anything signed because it was all on them. But it's if they come to you and say, well, I'll write $1 million, but do you think we can extend do you think I'd be able to get them to pay some closing costs? I can't give you any advice on what to offer unless we sign an agreement. Okay, so you cannot give any advice. You can give property information. It's 3 bedrooms, it's 2 bathrooms. It was built in 2016. You can give all the details. That's public information, but you can't give anything on what terms, price, anything like that to offer.
Robert, I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is this based on the settlement agreement we had?
Yes.
So
Yes.
if NAR and Keller Williams and Compass and all that, they go to court and they win, they're going to have different settlement or different rules for their companies as opposed to ours?
Maybe, but what the Wall Street person said that from DC that was there was no one's going to get out of this alive. Essentially, no one's gonna, even if NAR goes to trial, they're gonna go to trial, and KW is going to trial. Even if they quote unquote win, policies are still going to be changed. So it's just the way it's going to go. So that's why Anywhere and Remax, which are the 2 biggest real estate companies in the world, that's why they just said, we're done. Like, we're not going to win. That was their words. We're not going to win. There's no win here. All it is more money and a length of time drawn out. We just want out now. We'll make the changes. We just want out now. Because everyone just seems to think that this whole idea of going to trial is just a waste of time and waste of money, that the Department of Justice is not going to let anyone off without making policies. Now, some companies might make different policies, could be stricter, could be looser, but there are going to be policies changed.
Right.
No
And
doubt
you said
about
the
it.
MLS has already implemented these policies.
The MLS already implemented the policy that you can't search by buyer's agent commission. So if you were to go in your MLS right now and you pull up a bunch of listings in Chino Hills, they'll show BAC, right? But if you try to click on BAC to filter by it, it won't let you.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Robert, did you see?
hold on a second. Sandy, I'm sorry. What was your question, Sandy?
You already answered my question already. Thank you.
Okay.
Robert,
Michael, go ahead.
no, I just say, I don't know if you saw this morning the news. The other one they also gave up, like Remax, was Coldwell Banker. this morning, they settled for $83 million. I sent
Yeah,
that to me.
well, right. So Coldwell Banker is part of Anywhere. So Anywhere owned Coldwell Banker, Century 21, Better Homes and Gardens, Sotheby's. Anywhere owns all those brands. So they were all part of the settlement. So yeah, you're right. It's Coldwell Banker, all part of the settlement. So most of the large companies are out, and you're protected. The brands are protected for 5 years. So nobody in the past, right? Nobody in the past can come back and say, "Oh, hey, wait. We got a new lawsuit from 2018." Nope, we're protected. So they can't bring up any old lawsuits or old complaints or anything like that. So that's done.
Robert, where's this money going to?
It's not going to me. So hold on one second. So Carrie asked a question, how does that cross over for teams with more than one agent? If the buyer agent represents the buyer, another team has the listing. Same thing, you have to get a buy. So let's say that the team leader has the listing and you're a buyer's agent, you want to show that listing. You could show the listing, but if they want to get any advice on what they should write on the property or the terms, then you have to get a buyer representation agreement signed. So even if it's the same team, the team leader has the listing, the buyer's agent's now representing the buyer. If they want any advice on what to offer, you have to get a buyer's representation agreement signed.
I have
Hey,
a question, Robert.
Go ahead.
So which one stands more? Let's go back to the scenario when you have a buyer and so they're asking you about your opinion on pricing. You have them sign a buyer broker agreement.
You can have a buyer broker agreement or an agency agreement.
Okay, so no matter what, if you have those, then you're fine, right?
Then you're fine. So, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I can't give you any advice until we have an agreement to work together. That's part of the rules. They sign that agreement and they say, okay, we signed an agreement. So what do you think I should write? Okay, why don't we write it up as this? And then I can take it to the seller, or why don't we write these types of terms, or whatever the case be. Now I can give advice. Now I can give opinion. But until they sign it, I'm just going, I can't give you any advice on what to write in terms of price, terms, anything like that. I can submit an offer. If you want to come up with your own price and terms, I can submit the offer, but I can't give you any advice.
Hey, Robert, you know, when you have a hot listing and you have buyers coming and say, I want you to write an offer for me. Let's say that you got 3 or 4 different buyers coming. You got to do 4 different contracts.
Gotta do 4 different ones. Gotta do 4 different ones. So, yep. That's just, that's the way it goes.
Agency
Yes, Jack.
agreement you mentioned is the disclosure regarding agency relationship, right?
Correct. So I talked to a few people about that. The agency agreement just says, hey, I'm working with this this agency. The buyer broker agreement means you have to put a minimum commission and a certain length, things like that. So for double ending purposes, you could just get the agency agreement signed. Okay. That in terms of that. So but let me give you a little bit of another little thing on that. It's very, very important that you work on getting these agreements signed anyways. Okay. Because double ending it's probably not going to happen anytime now, but in the next 2+ years, double ending is going to go through the roof. Okay. And I'll get to why that is in a second. Okay. So if you don't
Unmute. Can we mute Mark?
yes, I just need someone to give me muting abilities.
Robert. For
Yes,
the
Amanda.
when you're signing with the buyer, like the person that comes to you says like, hey, I also want to buy with you, but you're also in charge of the listing. Do you have to first get the permission from the seller before you do that, or can you just
You
sign?
don't have to get permission, but it's probably it's a conversation you should always have with the seller anyways.
Okay, cool.
So look, I have a buyer, they want me to represent them. Are you okay with me doing that? But I would probably have that conversation at the listing appointment anyways. Is, hey, FYI, if somebody calls me and wants me to represent them, are you okay with that? Or do you want me to give it to another agent? That way they're just in the know. And then you just you would just let them know. It's, look, my duty is to you, but sometimes they want to come to me just because they feel like, they might get their offer accepted if they just skip the line. So We're always going to look at your best interest. Okay, so that's a biggie. Okay, so make sure that you all are doing that going forward on anything that stuff. Do any of you work in a flood zone area? Anybody here work in a flood zone area?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
The beach.
Okay. Okay. So I learned something new this week, and just for something for you to at least pay attention to. So I don't really get into politics. So I don't really know what's going on in politics. However, for those of you that get into politics, and this is not an open forum for you to give your political opinion, this is just me telling you what's going on. Okay. The Speaker of the House was recently removed.
I have an opinion.
Okay. I'm sorry. Somebody mute that man. I'm just kidding. The Speaker of the House was recently removed. So they have some candidates to replace the Speaker of the House. Why is this important? I learned this week that if there's no Speaker of the House, they can't pass any legislation. Now, why that's important in real estate is because the national flood insurance policy needs to be extended. So if they can't get a Speaker in the House by November 14th, the government will probably go into shutdown, which means that the national flood insurance policy will not be extended until they're. And if that policy is not extended and you have clients that are in a flood zone, they probably won't be able to get loans. Okay, so it's something for those of you that work in flood zones to just kind of pay attention to what's going on with the national flood insurance policies, because those need to be extended and they can't do it without a Speaker of the House. So just something to pay attention to. Or if you have homes that are in flood zones and you have someone that's trying to buy a house, you might want to make sure that November 14th is kind of a cutoff date, just in case that they do go into shutdown. You might not be able to get loans closed if it's in shutdown if you're in a flood zone area. So try to, if you're in a flood zone, try to get everything closed before then, just in case. So just so you know that. Okay.
Robert, is there a resource to find like what floods, like which areas are flood zones?
I'm sure there is. And if I find out, I'll let you know.
Okay, thanks.
You
But
can
I
ask
would-
you can ask your title rep.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
They
Title
have
rep.
maps.
Armin, what were you gonna say?
Did they talk at all about the insurance issues here in California?
So they did bring that up. They kind of skipped over it a little bit because there weren't very many people from California there. But they did bring that up in terms of the insurance issues. They did say that it is something that NAR and CAR are talking about with insurance companies, because it's the new policies are going to kill people. But they said right now they're just really in preliminary discussions, that there's nothing on the table as far as how they're going to handle that. But but they just did say that they are in discussion. So that's kind of all they got into there. Okay, a couple more things I want to point out. So one more thing in regards to this stuff, and then I'll get into some other stuff. Buyer's commission. Okay, this has obviously been a very big discussion. Here's the deal. I'm going to be just totally cutthroat about it. In 2+ years, if you are not taking listings, you're not going to make any money. It's just the way it's going to go. The way the buyer commissions are going forward, and here's why I say this. Here was the ultimate wow moment to me. They were talking about buyer agents commissions and how, now that there's going to be going forward, there's going to be a lot more transactions where either the buyer's going to be in charge of paying the buyer's agent's commission, or the commission percentage going to buyer's agent is going to be really low. And so you're going to have to try to get the buyer to pay a portion of it. That's going to be very common. So this guy raises his hand and he says, look, I'm in an area with a lot of VAs. And these are 25-year-old kids that have $500 to their name. This is what he said. Okay, $500 to their name. And I go to them and I say, hey, look, I can represent you, but you got to pay me $10,000. They don't have that. What do you want me to do? And this is what the lady said, and I quote, good luck. And I just went, so for VA buyers, like the most protected source of buyers or sellers, right? That group, you would think there would be some, okay, VAs, we're going to make sure. For a VA buyer, if you're the agent and that buyer doesn't have any money, and that deal says we're only going to pay you $1,000 to represent the buyer, no recourse, nothing you can do. You either go to that buyer and say, I can't help you because I'm only going to make $1,000 on this deal or $1 on this deal, or you take the money, whatever money you can get. But there is no recourse. There's no policies in place or in the future in place to help agents get 2%, 1.5% from a buyer side deal. None. Not for VA, FHA, nothing. So, first of all, they also said, which is something we've heard here in California, that it's probably not going to be a big impact for maybe 2 years, but probably 2 years from now, it is going to be a very common practice for that to be the case, where either the buyer's agents, the seller's going to say, no, the buyer's got to pay the buyer's agent's commission, or the seller's going to say, you know what, I'll pay half. So I'll pay 0.5%, and then they can have the buyer's agent pay the rest. Okay, or the buyer pay the rest. So now you're going to be negotiating with the buyers. And that's going to be common practice, because one of the other policies that's going to go into place is that it hasn't passed yet, but it looks like it's probably going to happen, is that companies are not going to be able to put a minimum commission percentage for agents working with buyers. So a company's not going to be able to say, hey, look, if you want to work with a buyer, you have to at least get 2%. They're not going to be able to do that. So if an agent comes to you and says, hey, I got to deal with a buyer, I'm only getting paid $1,500, companies are going to be like, okay, right? So there's not going to be any recourse. So you have to keep that in mind. Okay, that's why I said double ending is going to go through the roof, because what's going to happen in those types of transactions, the buyer is going to say, well, look, I only have $1,000. This agent doesn't want to work with me for $1,000. I'll just go directly to the listing agent, and which the listing agent is going to go, sure. We open up escrow, I get an extra grand, pays my marketing. Double ending is going to go through the roof. Okay, which is why it's even more important for you to become really good listing agents.
Robert, I had a question.
Oh, hold on one second. Let me finish, and then we'll get to questions on that. So here's what they said. Best practices. 1, you've got to get a buyer broker agreement signed with every buyer. You have to get one signed. And actually, Cindy had mentioned this was separate from C21. Cindy was on a call with the CAR attorney on Friday, and they're contemplating making it mandatory. That if you work with a buyer, you have to get a buyer representation agreement signed. Okay. So for those of you that are uncomfortable doing that, better go figure out how to take listings. Okay. So that's that. Number 2, 1, because it protects you from buyers shopping other agents to see who's going to offer the least amount of money. Okay. So it protects you from doing that. But 2, you also have to make sure that you put some sort of compensation on the buyer broker agreement that says, when I represent you, I get paid this amount of money. So if the seller's not going to pay it, that's on you. Okay. So you have to make sure that's on there. So you're protecting yourself to get some sort of money. However, they did say that if you get to a transaction and the buyer doesn't have the money to pay you, then it's up to you. You can either say, well, tough shit buyer, I guess you're not going to buy a house until our contract is up, or you're going to negotiate with them, which is probably what most people are going to do, is say, okay, I know we have a contract for 2%, but sure, if you can only pay me $5,000, then we'll take it. Okay. So
Robert,
you've got to get a buyer representation agreement signed, which means you have to learn how to do a buyer consultation, because you can't get an agreement signed if you don't do a great presentation. It's just like a listing. So I would very heavily, for those of you, two things. One, spend every amount of time, effort, energy you have to become great listing agent. So that way this doesn't affect you. And two, work on doing a buyer consultation, work on asking them to find a contract, work on showing value, because even if CAR doesn't make it mandatory, you're still going to want to get it done. And if CAR does make it mandatory, you're going to have to get it done. Okay. And so you have to learn this stuff. If only there was people that taught it. So, okay, you've got to learn this stuff. This is really important. But that's the deal with the buyer's agent's commissions, okay, going forward. There's not going to be recourse. Now, when you're talking to your sellers, essentially it's on the listing agents to explain to the seller why it might be beneficial. So if you're taking a listing at a $400,000 price point, you need to let them know, look, if you have the buyer pay the buyer's agent's commission, you're taking out all VA, FHA buyers, which could represent a large amount of the buyers in your price point. Okay, so you have to educate them on why it might be beneficial for them to pay the buyer's agent some money if you're in a price point when you know there's those types of buyers. But I'm telling you, when that lady looked at that VA guy and said, good luck, I went, wow, like there is nothing. Okay, so I would just don't be shocked. And right now, I talked to Cindy the other day. Cindy said it's not a shock when a file comes along anymore with that type of commission per structure. It's not a high percentage in our market, but it's not a shock. But you know what's going to happen as this keeps getting bigger and more news, sellers are going to see, oh, wow, I don't have to pay them this amount of money. Agents are going to say, okay, well, hey, look, well, I'll offer even lower commission because I don't have to pay the buyer's agent. You know, that's what's going to happen. So very important that you protect yourself against those types of things.
Robert?
Yes,
Robert.
go ahead.
So for
I
that,
just-
so it's basically, for now at least, it's until it's being brought up as a commission objection. I mean, objection, then we don't need to address it. Just do what we usually do.
Right. This is probably not anything that's going to make a major impact for a couple years. But I'm just letting you know now, so that way you have a couple years for those of you that are not great listing agents to become really good listing agents. And for those of you that don't get buyer broker agreement signed, you got to figure out how to get them signed. Okay, you have to start doing that now. Start practicing that now. Start practicing your buyer consultations, because you're really going to be in a tough spot in a couple years if you can't do those things.
Hey,
Kamel,
Robert,
go ahead. Hold on one second, Michael. Kamel, you had a question.
Yeah, I think it was addressed a little bit. So the sellers are going to probably be in control because they're going to say, well, you're not really having to search for buyers agents and buyers to bring buyers. I want a flat rate commission, and that it could kind of put the market where everybody's charging the same thing to be a listing agent, correct?
Could be. I actually am looking at it from a different perspective, is that I think we're going to get more money on the listings. Because I could go to a seller and say, look, let's just say it's 5%, 2.5 to me, 2.5 to the buyer's agent. And they say, I don't want to pay a buyer's agent. I'm gonna say, okay, great. Then you're going to pay 3.5 to me. Okay, so you're still saving money because instead of 5, you're paying 3.5. But I'm charging 3.5 because I'm going to have to do a little bit more work to make sure we find a qualified buyer that's going to buy your property. So you're still saving money, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, but now I'm getting more as a listing agent. So I actually think if you're a listing agent, if you play it correctly, you can actually probably get more money. Plus, you're going to double in almost all your transactions.
Okay, so say the listings go on Zillow, right, and Redfin and all that. So the buyers are just going to go on the internet, find the house, call the agent, say, hey, I want this house,
Correct.
and then how are they going to
Correct.
get more commission? The listing agents, it's kind of because they're not really, it's not like they're a big field of agents that they can work with. It's just
Right,
buyer.
so
just
they'll
goes,
go
it's
to-
kind of like
they'll go to the
shopping
li-
for cars, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like on the
yeah.
internet,
So
you can
they'll
shop for cars.
go to the listing agent and say, hey, I want you to represent me. And the listing agent will say, okay, great, no problem. This is how much I charge to represent buyers. I charge 1%, 2%. And then the buyer can say, well, I only have $5,000. Okay, fine. So you're still now, so if a buyer calls you, you're still now negotiating whatever the buyer's agent's commission is. Assuming that you put $0 as a buyer agent commission in the MLS, because if you put 1%, then you're getting 1%.
Right, but that's going to be eliminated because you're not offering anything to the buyer's agent. So if I'm a seller, I'm going to say, well, hey, Robert, you're asking them to pay you a commission where you're saying there is no buyer's compensation now. It's kind of, I
It's
think
up
it
to
muddies the water.
correct. So you have to, it's up. So you wouldn't put it as a buyer's, there's no buyer's compensation. You would put it as the buyer to pay the buyer's agent. So then that way, if a buyer calls you and says, hey, I saw your property at 123 Main Street, but I saw the buyer's commission is that the buyer's in charge of paying you, I can pay you $5,000. Okay,
Oh.
sure. Write it up.
Hey, Robert.
Yep.
I'm just saying about the way you see it, the benefit. When you are on the listing presentation in 2 years, you're gonna have to tell the seller the way that we're gonna advertise it. We're gonna lose all the advertising to all those buyers agents. I understand you say, well, you call in, but even today, that is a percent of that. Most of the sales are done by other agents that come in from other areas. So the seller is gonna lose all that exposure, basically. They say you're not going to be able to get all those agents coming with the buyers, and now only the listing agent and accept one person. The seller's also going to be screwed there.
Yeah, well, it's up. That's why it's up to us to explain it to them where there may be the benefit. But in the reality is most buyers don't work with a buyer's agent. Like as far as having a buyer's agent find them property, most buyers go on to Redfin, call an agent, and say, I want to see this property. That's what there's very rare, there are very little true buyer's agents out there that go and find properties for a buyer and say, hey, let's go see these ones. So so in that particular case, what's probably going to happen is that's why I'm saying double lending is going to go up. They're going to cut off a lot of it's not the buyer's agents that they're cutting off, it's the FHA and VA buyers. Because realistically, I could put a listing on the MLS and have buyers come see it. That's just a reality. There's very few buyers agents that say, hey, I found this property, let's go see it. Where it's gonna hurt some sellers, and you're on the right track, is if you have a $400,000 home and they say, I want the buyer to pay the buyer's agent's commission, we have to educate them to say, okay, but if you do that, that means your FHA buyers are FHA because they don't have $10,000 extra. VA buyers probably don't have $10,000, $20,000 extra to pay for this house. So if you have the buyer pay the buyer's agent's commission, we're losing all those buyers. Do you
I have
want to
another
do
question.
Can I
Oh,
say
hold on.
something?
Hold on one
Can I
second. Go
say
ahead, Gabby.
something? Okay, first of all, I don't agree with you, Michael, because the property can be advertised as anywhere, and the buyer can go and contact you directly. Or if they have the buyer's agent, the buyer can go and pay the buyer's agent. Doesn't matter what. It's not a problem with that. My concern is, like you were saying, Robert, we are going to be cutting those VA buyers or FHA buyers. Is that going to bring some kind of discrimination problem in the future?
Oh, yeah.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you say,
They
well, I
covered
don't want
that.
to
They
work
covered
with
that.
you because
They
you're
covered that
VA
because you're not
complainer?
specifically saying, I don't want low down payment buyers. I'm not specifically saying I don't want VAs, I don't want FHAs. If you were specifically saying, I don't want a low down payment buyer, that's discrimination. In this, they went, that's a great question. They went over this and they said, it's not discrimination because all you're doing is saying, I want the buyer to pay the buyer's agent's commission or part of the commission. So I'm not, now look, obviously that cuts out a certain group of people.
It is a very gray line there.
I know, but
Mhm.
because I'm not, it's because the seller is not specifically saying, I don't want a low down payment buyer, then it's not discrimination. It's just
No,
a
but you are
broad
the buyer's
statement that
agent,
could
and
go to anybody.
no, you're an agent. For example, you are the agent. You are the ones that I have that listing, and you are not, and the seller is not offering anything to the buyer's agent, and the buyer is coming to you, and they say, I want to buy the house, and you say, I don't want you work for free for you. You as an agent, and you're discriminating that client in
No.
some way.
No,
No?
because
No, because you're
I
basically
could just
saying-
say, hold on, Nick. Because I could say, they come to me and they say, I want to work with you. Great. My fee is this. It's not my fee because you're FHA. It's not my fee because you're VA. not my fee because you have $1 million. My fee is this
Okay,
to represent you as a buyer. It's a fee that's the same for everybody. Now, if that FHA buyer says, well, I can't pay that, I can only pay this, then you can either A, accept it, or B, say, then I'm sorry, we can't work together, which is not discrimination because I'm charging the same fee for every person.
I
Now,
understand. Thank you so
if I
much.
had said, now, if I said, oh, well, you're putting your FHA, well, for you, I charge 1.5% because you're FHA. Like, well, wait, why am I 1.5 because I'm FHA? But if I'm 1%, 2%, whatever across the board, then we're good.
Okay, perfect. So my
Okay.
other question
So
is,
hold
Okay,
on,
go.
because this is a topic that can go on for a long time, and I'm going to talk more about it this week. But I wanted to at least just give you the basics, okay? Because there's a
Okay.
couple other things that I want to cover before we go. So okay, a couple more things. We don't ever promote Century 21 training classes. Never have. My goal this week was to find out what training class Century 21 can offer. So they pulled me aside and showed me this. There's some really great training classes that actually Century 21 has. And so we're going to be launching those starting next week. I'm going to do some classes on those so you can see what's available. But they got some really cool things going on their tools and stuff like that. So don't be surprised going forward if you see, hey, we're pushing a couple Century 21 things. They actually got some really cool stuff with some great speakers. Okay, so there's that. Two more things, and then we're gonna go. One of the other takeaways I got there is that we are not unique in terms of our market, in terms of our objections, in terms of our struggles, anything like that. So everyone I talk to is, oh yeah, we're down this. Our market's down this. We're down this. Yeah, we're dealing with this. Everyone's dealing with the same stuff. Okay. So I bring that up because my mentality was this when I was talking to other broker owners, I was talking about people, and they say, our market's this. Yeah, our market's down, blah, blah, blah. But we're this. Everyone's going through the same thing. But if that means if everyone's going through the same thing, if some people are up, then we should be up. Because everyone's going through the same inventory issues, interest rate issues, commission issues. Everybody I talk to is going through the same stuff. It's just a matter of how you adapt. And some of these people are adapting really well. All right. And they're just changing how they go about the marketplace to make sure that their business stays up. So I just bring that up to you, be like, we just have to create that adapt mentality because everyone's going through the same thing. It's not unique to Southern California. Okay, it's not unique to Century 21 Masters. It is a national thing going on in terms of what's happening in the marketplaces. Okay, so focus on adapting. Focus on adapting. Because if they're up, if someone else is up in Texas, then there's no reason why we can't be up in our market because they're going through the exact same problems. Okay. On that note, though, they gave me a homework assignment. And I got this, and then I'm going to end with one more thing. They gave everyone a homework assignment to say, value, you need to know your value more than ever. Now, I couldn't believe when they gave this homework assignment because I swear I've heard it from somewhere before. Write down 4 to 5 things that make you different, and can you articulate those 4 to 5 things? They said this at a seminar. I went, that's really good. Where'd you learn that from? And the guy who says it just looks at me and walks away. And I went, yeah, stealing my stuff. At least give me credit for it. But it's a homework assignment I had to do. Homework assignment for you. I'm sorry. There was 2 more things. Century 21 is rebranding its social media, so be on the lookout for that. They hired a new marketing person who is an awful presenter. However, she is really smart when it comes to, she's a terrible presenter. Terrible. Okay. But the social media stuff that they have coming up is actually really cool. It actually makes Century 21 look like they're really reasonable in terms of today's market. So I was very, very excited for the marketing, branding, all this other stuff. Essentially what they're trying to do, they're coming out with this new thing called home team advantage. They're treating Century 21 the way that they worded it was as a successful sports franchise. So people like the Miami Heat, the LA Lakers, like all these other different types of brands that are big brands and that run successfully and have all these different operations. That's what they're running. So it's going to be a lot of rah-rah, a lot of really cool features, sounds. I mean, they displayed some of it, some really cool marketing things going on at Century 21. So be on the lookout for there. They're going to launch that, I think, in December, going into the fourth quarter. But I think you're going to be very pleased with some of the marketing stuff that they have going on. It's stuff we haven't seen before. So it's all in to say that there's a lot of Century 21 stuff that we've never used as a company that we're going to really start implementing, because I think that if we already have what we have individually, and then if we can implement some of the Century 21 stuff in there, then you're going to be armed with just crazy amounts of tools. So there's that. Last thing, hold on one second. Let me just text him real quick. Finishing a class, comma, be there in a couple minutes. A meeting with Keith. Okay, last thing is this. Here's what else I learned. My takeaway from the leadership summit. You work for the right company. There was no company bigger, better, more sought after to talk to at that summit than ours. I mean, it's crazy. Everybody wants to talk to us. Okay. From the lending side of things, lending went crazy. We did this whole presentation for lending. We now got 10 other companies on board, and a bunch of lending went crazy. Real estate, I couldn't get a break. Everybody wants to talk to Robert, right? Everybody wants to talk to Randy. Like, what are you guys doing? Can you help me out with my agents? Can you help me out with this? We were the talk of the town. We had the presidents, the CEOs, the marketing, everyone from corporate wants to have a drink with us. Everyone wants to sit at our table. Like, we are the cool kids, which is rare for me because I've never been cool. Okay. But I'm telling you this because I really think that our team should wear GoPros, so you all really understand the amount of hustle that we're doing at these events. I am talking to everyone, if I can, because most people are talking to me. But I'm not taking breaks. What are you doing? What are you doing? What's working? What's working for your company? What's working for your agents? Everyone wants to talk to Randy. He's a celebrity, right? And plus, even if you don't want to talk to him, you hear him. All right. So, but I'm telling you, our company is like no joke. Everyone from corporate wants us. That's important because when Century 21 launches things, okay, or when something's coming up, we're always going to be number one. We're always going to get the first shot at things. We're always going to get stuff before it goes out to everyone else. And from a growth pattern, when it comes to acquisitions in our marketplace, they're always going to send the people high ups in Century 21 are always going to send them to us first. Hey, you know what? You were interested in selling? Go talk to Randy. Go talk to those boys. We are full on like celebrities, big deals at that conference. And we work like crazy. I wish you could see how hard we work at these conferences. And we're only working hard, not for ego base, but because we want to learn and get better. Because if we learn and get better, you learn and get better, and it makes everybody more money. But you all are in the right place because it's crazy. You think what we do at Mike Ferry is big? Yeah, no. We're with the heads of all Century 21. I'll leave you with something kind of funny. I thought it was funny. I lost my patience on the last day. Because they have these dinners and stuff like that. And when I go to any of these events, I'm exhausted because I go. Even when I'm in the classes, I'm taking notes like crazy, like I go. And again, everybody wants to talk to me, or people come up to me like, oh, so-and-so told me to talk to you. Okay. So-and-so told me to talk to you. Okay. So the last night, it's Friday night, and Blake is the same way. Our director of lending, like he goes all day. So like Blake and I are sitting at the table, like we're having dinner. It's the last night, and there was like another guy at our table, right, who wasn't with our company, and he was just a douchebag. Okay. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's what he was. He was being egotistical. He was whatever. You know, one of those types of guys that likes to brag. I'm not a nice guy. Like, okay, Mr. Tough Guy. Right. So it's like 8 o'clock. The thing ends at 8:30. I was like, all right, I'm gonna head up to the room. I'm tired. I'm gonna head up to the room. My voice was gone. And he goes, no, come on, it's the last night. Let's all go out. Haven't had a chance to hang out with you guys. I'm like, no, man, I'm tired. He goes, why are you tired? I'm not tired. I said, I know you're not tired because nobody wants to talk to you. I said, I'm tired because everybody wants to talk to me. And so I haven't had a break in 3 days. You've had 3 days of rest. You shouldn't be tired. And he just put his head down and everyone at our table just started laughing. I was like, I'm sorry. I lost my patience, but he was being a douche. And you know what? He needed to know, he needed to be put in his place. So Randy comes up to me afterwards. He goes, I love you. And you know what? You're right. And I'm like, I'm sorry, man, I'm working. So it was a fun experience, but I leave you with that because we work. My voice was gone. It just came back about an hour ago. We're hustling. So you all are with the right group. And we're proud that you're with our group because we brag about all of you like crazy. How many agents you got? We got this, and we're doing this, and we're doing this. And I'm telling you about all your wins. So you stick around here. We're going to be all right. You're going to be with a good place. All right, good stuff. All right, look, I know that was a lot, and there's a lot of the legal stuff to cover. We're going to do all that in the next couple of weeks, more and more of those conversations. But look, if you have any questions, anything I can help out with, don't hesitate to reach out. A lot of really cool things going on. We'll talk more about it. I apologize for being late. Things going on, but I'm glad you stuck around. And let's just go out there and let's have some fun.
Thank you, Robert.
All right,
Thank you,
everybody.
Robert.
Here, Robert.
Thank you.